Welcome back everyone to Chris and his Q. Today we're going to be swapping out the suspension in the car. I have waited for this for a very long time. Unfortunately, parts are always very expensive, and with this car, sometimes they are rare. I'm very anxious to get this done, so without further ado, let's get started.
Now before we dig into the tips and tricks that helped me get this suspension swap done smoothly, I want to go ahead and encourage you, if you have a Q45 yourself, to go ahead and check out the Nickel Club forums. Another thing to mention is that if you do have a Q45 and you want to go ahead and do a suspension swap like this one, then please be ready to spend almost twice the amount to get everything done right. What I mean by this is that even though all the parts I just swapped have rubber bushings that need to be replaced, there's still plenty of rubber bushings all around the frame and the rear tire knuckles that need to be replaced. If you don't eventually swap these bushings out, all these fancy parts won't do you much good, as the Q is very heavy and will most likely end up shaking or jiggling slightly when you're driving at highway or city speeds. With that said, unlike my last video, this will not be a step-by-step manual on how to do a suspension swap on the Q, but if you do need a little bit more help doing so, there is another YouTuber who did post a suspension swap himself. Although I was a bit sad when I saw this video, as I kinda did want to be the first one to post a video on a suspension swap, I'm still glad that there's other people out there keeping the Q45 family going. Now getting into the tips and tricks to make your coilover swap easier, go ahead and take the wheel hub off first, as when you do take the strut off, it is going to be much harder trying to get that wheel spindle nut off. Unless you're super rich and have connections everywhere in Japan where you can get a new wheel hub, then don't pay attention to this tip.
Out with the old, in with the new.
But if you are one of those guys, please hit me up. I do want to get a lot of new parts for my car. Second tip I can give is do not do what I just did and measure your coilovers to match the same height as the OEM struts. My car ended up looking like a lowrider who had the front wheels raised. Instead, just try to ballpark the height you want, and once everything is installed, go ahead and lower the car to the preferred height. Same thing goes for the camber arms and the tension rod. Once you lower the car, you'll end up having to readjust these guys anyway. One thing you can get done first before installing the coilovers though, is go ahead and move the top hat of the coilover all the way inwards, which is facing the engine. Once you install the sway bar, you'll see that this little bit of clearance will make all the difference in the world. You'll also won't scratch your top hat once you try to move it, since the coilover won't have any weight on it. Now another very crucial important step is that when you're taking off the wheel speed sensors off of the OEM struts, go ahead and be really careful. More than likely, if you are taking them off, they will be the OEM sensors, which are very old and fragile. And the second thing to note is that a new wheel speed sensor will run you somewhere around $200, and just to replace both, that is $400. So just do very light taps, spray some WD-40 to get the job done right. I am not 100% pleased with that sway bar link, but I will go ahead and let you guys know if it works, if it breaks, or if it's better. Well guys, one good thing about waiting months to make this video is I can actually report on plenty of things that happen after the suspension upgrade. First and foremost, that little sway bar did break, so if you're gonna be like me and do the whole suspension upgrade and you're gonna be driving your car very aggressive, go ahead and throw those little links away. If you do end up getting the same control arms as I did for the front and you don't want to run the little sway bar links that they gave you, go ahead and cut that tab off. Reason for that is the little tab that is made for the sway bar links on the control arm does not let the sway bar go down enough to fit the OEM sway bar links that attach to the strut, in this case the coilover. This is honestly something I could have done in the first place, but since I was trusting Megan Racing and their products, I just went ahead and forced the little sway bar links in, which, like I mentioned, did work. It lasted me about 3 to 4 months. But if you're gonna go ahead and do this and you're not gonna drive your car that aggressive, go ahead and just force them on. They will work wonders as is. Like I mentioned, it's something I could have avoided, but you live and you learn. But that is pretty much it for the front suspension. Like I mentioned in the beginning, it was going to be fairly easy. So while I'm putting everything back together, go ahead and enjoy the music for a bit or skip forward for the rear suspension. Alrighty, so for the rear suspension, it wasn't that hard or tricky, but trying to get all the bolts back on was a little tough, as you had to pull and tug a little bit. But if you do want to save your elbows and shoulders, go ahead and replace each part as I'm doing so. When I did the other side, I did struggle a bit since I did take everything off. Once I installed all the parts, all the pillow ball bearings gave me no play or budge, so I had to tug and pull really hard for about an hour or two. But like I mentioned, if you want to save your elbows, just go ahead and replace each part as I'm doing so. This will definitely save you a couple hours on the upgrades. If you also don't want to take apart the entire rear, go ahead, follow the steps I took. That way, you don't have to take apart the entire knuckle assembly. Another thing to note is you gotta have some vice grip pliers on hand, as when you try to take the ball joint from the bottom, it will spin and make your life difficult. But if you have some vice grip pliers, they should make everything much easier. Another thing to note is the toe arms are adjustable from stock, so when you are taking the bolt and nut off, don't loosen the bolt, try to loosen the nut. If you do try to loosen the side with the bolt, you'll most likely end up stripping one of the washers, which is on the side of the nut that lets you adjust the negative or positive toe. You'll most likely end up stripping this and making it almost impossible to take the bolt out, and you'll most likely end up having to replace the bolt as well. So once again, just go ahead and follow the steps I took. It'll make it much more easier to get the suspension upgrade get done nice and smoothly.
So that's pretty much going to be it for all the tips I have for the rear. So for now, just enjoy the music a little bit while I finish putting everything back together. once I'm finished with that, I'll go ahead and talk about setting up the alignment and what types of specs I put for the car. Now, although the car was pretty dirty, I still love how it came out. Definitely gonna be a lot better than all those rubber bushings. It's that time of the day, guys. We're gonna finally get an alignment in this car. After switching out all the suspension, it's a must because the steering wheel's not quite straight and it does wobble back and forth. I tried to align it myself the best I could, but I am no professional. Definitely need to get this done by a professional. Hopefully once we get the wheel alignment, this car is gonna feel better than it ever was. Alright guys, so looks like they're about to bring the car in. They took the other guy out. We're gonna see how badly it is aligned. Just washed it, so I hope it looks really nice.
Run it up, Kobo.
Yeah, but no more swerving in the highway. So that's how I eyeballed it. Definitely crooked. No need to be like that. But good thing we're gonna be changing that. It's gonna be nice and straight. Alrighty guys, so for the rear, this is what I'm gonna go for. Reason being is I do need a little bit of camber in the rear, and the toe end is definitely gonna be helpful for when I'm making those tight corners. I did forget to get a clip or a screenshot of the computer which shows the end results. So instead of letting myself ramble on this clip, I want to go ahead and just tell you the settings for the front. For the front, I chose 2.5 degrees of camber. In this case, it would be negative camber. 1/16 of toe out, and 6.5 degrees of positive caster. Another thing to mention is anytime you drive off with your car, especially when it has a bunch of adjustable suspension parts, don't hesitate to ask if you can check everything. I don't want to blame anybody, but some of the nuts were a little bit loose. Once I was driving in the highway, I felt something shaking, so I immediately went home, checked underneath, and sure enough, the camber arms were loose. The tension rods were a little bit loose, but not too bad. But this is why I say you should definitely go ahead and ask. You don't want to risk crashing or causing any damage to your vehicle, especially when you invest a lot of money into it, like putting aftermarket parts. But thank you guys for watching until the end. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if you really enjoyed it, go ahead and drop a like and subscribe to see more Q45 content. Anyways, until next time, take care and stay safe.